Good afternoon, this is Giles Edwards from 366 Weird Movies, and I'm sitting down with the makers of one of the opening night features, The Deeper You Dig. They're going to go around and introduce themselves, starting with...
Hi, I'm Zelda Adams. I'm 15 and I co-direct, act, and operate the camera.
I'm John Adams. I co-direct, act, and operate the camera and do the sound.
I'm Toby Poser. I'm co-writer, director, producer. I operate the camera sometimes, and I also act in film.
All right, so we have a genuine family of filmmakers here. I understand, I did a little research. Was it around 2013 that you did your first film together, somewhere around there? I was just wondering what prompted you to go ahead and just do something basically all on your own as a family unit?
Well, around the time of 2010-11, my acting roles began to wane, and I was often saying, I wish I could do something. And John encouraged me to write a script. He said, just do it, and I'll learn how to use a camera. And so we bought an old RV. We called it Harvey the RV, and we took off that summer and made our first film. Zelda was 6 and our older girl was 11.
So the older girl, you mentioned on the opening night that she was off studying school. Is she going into film from this experience?
She's not. She's not, but she was involved with our previous 4 films.
Okay.
Yeah, Zelda really was, out of the 2 girls, Zelda took to kind of all aspects of filmmaking right from the start. You were interested in holding that camera, and you were interested in acting. And it was great because Lulu really helped us on all of our movies, but she is more interested in psychology.
That's no bad thing. Speaking of psychology, I obviously saw your performance as Kurt and read a little on the other 4 movies you've done. It seems you always play a kind of deadbeat character. Is that by accident or design, or?
I think I'm interested in flawed, broken people, and probably because I'm a flawed, broken person. And so I enjoy doing those characters. And why do you think I'm always broken and flawed?
Because I think you said it best. You love people with cracks and wrinkles.
And all the characters in this movie, you all play them rather convincingly. Are they extensions of yourself, or are you just sort of putting an extra effort to try and relocate yourself into a different personality?
Well, as a mother, which is my favorite job in the world, I was very interested in how far a mother would go to love her daughter, and could she actually love the person who killed her daughter if her daughter encompassed that person's body. I just thought that is pretty trippy, and the answer is yes, I could.
I think guilt and mistakes and are something that fascinate me because I've had drug problems and I've had issues, and I think it's interesting to think about all the things that could have gone wrong and how you would have dealt with them if they went wrong, and even the things that how you dealt with things. I just think it's a great way to kind of move beyond mistakes you've made, is to explore them.
And you, Zelda, are you sort of a goth kid, hunter, enthusiast, sledder, or?
In real life, no, but it was fun to represent one because we wanted to have a goth character, but we wanted her to have a personality and create a relationship between her mom and her. And I think that we did that because we wanted to have people care about their relationship and care about Echo, so that they wanted her to get revenge on the antagonist.
And I know you all had, well, not you as the daughter, but you two had different histories before you ended up in the Catskills. What made you end up there as your base of operations, place of living?
Well, my family's from the Catskills. My grandparents came over from Ireland, and so we were raised in the Catskills. And when I met Toby, we started building a house together with like zero money and just cash, and eventually over time we built a house and it became our home base so that we could always go to Los Angeles and live, but if things didn't go well, we could always go back home. And so basically that's really why it became our home.
Okay. And I guess not to dwell too much on Kurt's character, but I did find he was certainly the most mysterious of the group, because there was a fairly early grounding of the relationship between the mother and daughter, from the get-go, and obviously being mother and daughter, that translates nicely on screen. One of the things I first noticed about Kurt was he wore a wedding ring, and to me that suggested, a kind of history. Was there more history for Kurt that you ever filmed or thought about, or?
So a great question, and it's so funny. We've talked about this so many times about, well, what happens if somebody says Kurt's wearing a wedding ring? And for me, I think the fun implication is that he has had a life, and it's gone because he's alone and completely lonely. And I find, like, the fact that you saw the wedding ring and care about it and want to ask that question, I think that that's really great, because I think that hopefully you're answering the question, where is this guy's wife? Now, we even thought at one point that we were going to eventually in this story show that Kurt had actually killed his wife. But that was going to be too, like, when it came around to do we want to execute this or not, it became too much. It was going to blow this story out of the water, and so it was like unnecessary, and it seemed smarter to have people who are paying attention answer that question themselves.
Yeah, I'd say that was a pretty good decision, because one of the things that this movie I think really relies on is there has to be a certain degree of sympathy for Kurt. You have to see that what he did to the girl was possibly not in his nature, just a kind of desperate act, and so I suppose the mystery that you maintain allows that kind of flexibility in the interpretation there. And speaking of interpretation, the tarot aspect, which I remember you mentioned a bit on during the question and answer session after the movie, you remarked on a woman who taught you quite a bit about that. I was sort of curious about the worm of shame that you consume in the sort of reconciliation sequence when your character is re-embracing her roots. Is that based on any specific lore, or was that a creative flourish of your own?
It was a creative flourish of our own, and so perceptive of you, and I'm so glad you say that, because there are always little subliminal circles I love to tie into my writing, just the intricate web that I emotionally am aware of, I think helps my writing, and that's one string that ties back to in the first circle when Ivy's being fed this snake. I just thought snake, worm, they're very similar, and they have to do with, in the first sequence, the denial that she's devouring, and then the sixth circle, beginning of the sixth circle, with the worm of shame, is another greasy thing that she's got to eat and swallow. And in this case, it's in trying to find the roots, to regain her roots as an intuit, and having denied those, it's just shame. To me, that was a manifestation of the shame she feels.
And the gentleman who played the other intuit, who had gone on and having embraced his nature and become financially successful through his efforts instead of just bilking old locals, as your character was obliged to. How did you come across him? As an old friend, or contact made with film buddies, or what?
He's one of my oldest friends and our oldest friends, and a godfather figure to our children. And he's just a magical dude himself. And we thought, this is the perfect casting.
And I guess that brings me to my next question. Obviously, you keep yourself busy. You've made, this is your fifth feature in 6 years or so. I can only presume you have other plans in mind, any of you? I know you said The Deeper You Dig was part of an idea that you had thought of, Zelda.
Well, we kind of, John and I made kind of an experimental horror film, and then we liked the idea of making horror, so we decided to start developing an idea And this is one that started off from just an idea that we ended up not liking. And when did it sprout? Like, just in a car ride, we were thinking of ideas, and we really liked this one.
You and I had a couple ideas that we were bouncing off of each other, and finally you were like, we were getting anxious because Toby was writing a script on a different subject, and we were kind of getting anxious because we had finished our little experimental horror thing, and Zelda settled on this one. And it started out basically very simply as a man kills a girl, and the only way for her to come back is to possess him. So that was the simple structure. And then when Toby came in to write it, it took on so much more dramatic value than that simple thing. If it had been left to Zelda and I, it would have been, very simple possession, horror, jump scares. And when Toby came in to write the script, it took on so much more dramatic flavor, and it became so much more in depth. And she brought in tarot cards, and the whole idea of like the 7 circles being the 7 stages of guilt, and all that kind of 7 stages of not guilt,
Grief.
but grief. So that's what's fun about it, is that each of us brings a piece to the puzzle of creativity. And now we're going through that same thing as we're talking to people like you, and we're showing our movie at Fantasia. We're learning again for our next movie that we're thinking. So we got 4 balls that we're throwing around in the air right now for our next idea.
Any hint on what
Yeah,
any of those balls
we'd
might
love
be?
to see
Sure.
which one you think might be the most interesting.
I've been working on a period piece. It takes place in 1850, off the Oregon Trail. 3 women who leave the perils of the trail to forge their own perilous journey towards the Northwest. It's a ghost story.
So we have 3 ideas that we're bouncing around on the way to soccer practice. One of them is if we want to make a happy movie, because we've never made a happy movie.
Yeah, I saw that from the descriptions.
And so we're
online.
like, so she's like, maybe we should make one happy movie. And although that's, okay. So our happy movie would be of a father and son, father and daughter, have a band together, and an A&R person finds them on YouTube, and a little bit of craziness ensues, and we'd have some twists and turns. But it would end up quite good. And then our 2 horror movies are.
One is about 2 different families go on a hunting trip and then encounter some spirits and become the hunted instead of the hunters.
And the last one is kind of a metaphoric kind of horror tale where there's 2 twin sisters and they've lost their father, and one sister kind of descends into hell and the other tries to go retrieve her. So it'd be more of a Greek myth type deal.
Yeah, mentioning the twin sister thing, obviously in a way you're kind of limited by the dynamic that you have. It's a sort of, mother figure, father or deadbeat figure, and daughter type person. Do you work with that, or do you have plans to perhaps eventually branch out into maybe something of a bigger scale, at least character-wise?
I think that we love working together, but we also hope that someday we'll get a little bigger and then can broaden our actors and sources.
We would like to, her answer is correct. I think we would like to spread, invite more people in and have more characters at play.
But I think what really works for us is our small dynamic and the intimacy of our production values. And I think that there are bigger names out there who actually would appreciate something like that. Because what we do is so organic and very real and simple. And I as an actor would love that experience, no matter with whom. And so we're hoping that there might be people who jive with our dynamic.
Yeah, because I know you indicated that you had a bunch of the people in the town that you were filming in are townsfolk there. I'm I'm hoping that maybe eventually they might be able to expand. I particularly like the exchange of whatever the fellow was on the bridge when you were emerging from the water had just a pitch perfect delivery for, and it's hard to do comedy in general, and especially with the sort of horror thing and sort of dark family atmospheric thing, to have this weird punctuation mark. It was like, get back to your car, please. But that kind of, I'd actually be happy to see him again, in another little
He
bit.
played himself.
He was not acting.
He is, we call him, locally he's known as the troll on the metal bridge, because he lives right next to it and he acts as if he owns it. And so it was serendipitous that he was there that day, because my dad, who was supposed to be the actor, didn't show up. And there he was, trolling the bridge, and we were like, could you do this? And he was like, I'd love to, So yeah. Well, I'm glad that you say that, though, about like regular people and using them as actors, though, because I think that's going to be our challenge now is how can we broaden out but maintain our mode of operation?
Yeah, because that's a tough thing. I have to watch all kinds of different movies for my job, including a lot at the level that you are making, very small, independent kinds of things. And non-actors can work well, often don't, kind of thing. So I'd say you either lucked out or were very prudent in your choice for who you had involved. The storekeeper fellow, is he the actual storekeeper there? Okay, he did a bang-up job. And
He did.
He owned that role, but obviously that makes sense now.
The detectives are both cops.
Oh, okay.
The woman was an undercover cop in the city, and the man is a regional sheriff.
Okay, yeah, the female cop was very intense.
And she is.
And
And she actually came up with her lines.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny that she said, like, did you see, how about any deer? She didn't know anything about the story. She didn't know that the deer imagery was going to be so important, and she said that. And we were all just like, okay, wow. So.
And my mom plays the older Mrs. Minsky.
Oh, okay. So she's the widow
Yeah.
there. Okay, yeah. That came across well. I can only presume she doesn't normally go around with as much makeup as she.
No, but it totally synced up with the clown. It gave us, it's sort of, again, another circle for us.
Yeah, so that was all captured. Yeah, small town, and I certainly appreciate any films I see filmed in upstate New York, because there's a lot of familiar sights. The first festival I covered here, there was a movie called Super Dark Times, which was filmed in Kingston.
We saw that.
We saw that.
I didn't know that.
And I thought, hey, I recognize all those kinds of weather elements, and the children, or the boys in that were actually, I was that age at the time when that movie was set, so it was all these little cues. He was like, there's my childhood, minus with the murder, but so it's
That
at least the murder.
yeah, that I know, and certainly that I'm admitting, on a recording that's going to be posted. So I do like to. It's reassuring for me personally to know that there are things going on in parts of New York State that aren't the more famous city part at the southern end there. And
Did you see Martha, Marcy-May, Marlene? It's with John Hawkins is in it. Elizabeth Olsen. It's a great film. That was shot right in our town.
Oh, okay.
Well, apparently this new
And
zombie
Quiet
movie.
Place was shot in Hudson Valley.
Okay.
Nancy was just shot in our town. Yeah.
And Jim Jarmusch, didn't he just make the zombie movie?
Oh, yes.
And that's supposed to be just maybe even more close to Troy, right?
I know.
Yeah, because I know downtown Troy has a number of very old buildings that, if you look down the avenue, and you can still see something from maybe closer to a century ago. So it's still got some of that old town flair. I know Scorsese did, I think it was Age of Innocence, had a number of shots. And the school that I mentioned that I live across from, Emma Willard, is this beautiful old edifice that a number of anything taking place in an academic environment from, days of yore typically springs up. So that's good that, it's always happy to meet some contemporary say locals here. And speaking of local, I guess I'll wrap this up quickly. I like to ask all my interviewees if they can recommend a good hometown restaurant for our viewers in case they find themselves in the Catskill area.
Well, yes, and yes. do we want to recommend? Let's recommend, because one of them is very famous, so we won't recommend
Yeah.
that because it's already been recommended. Like, it's funny, wherever we travel, if people say, where are you from? And we're from the Catskills, you know, most people, but they do know the Roscoe Diner. Do you know the Roscoe Diner?
I actually don't.
Okay,
but,
well, Roscoe Diner is internationally known, but Raimondo's is where we're going to have to recommend because it feeds us on late nights when we're done shooting and we don't want to cook. And they always have soccer on TV.
And it's Italian.
And it has an original pizza pie that's, I think, terrific. And we love their Caesar salad. And these guys like to order eggplant parmesan, but I don't. I always like the pizza. Yeah.
Can't blame you.
And they make a nice double espresso.
I don't get that. Do not, no.
Yeah, because from Troy, a lot of upstate New York, there are a whole lot of people descended from Italian immigrants from
Yeah,
various
right?
waves, and it's
Apparently they came to make the walls. Like they
Oh,
were
okay.
stone, like a lot of the Italians were stonemasons.
Oh. Well, regardless, I'm pleased that certainly in Troy there are plenty of good Italian places to go around. So Raimondo's, if I'm there, which I guess isn't inconceivable considering the proximity, I'll be sure to
And call us because we'll come meet you for
wonderful.
pizza.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
set that up. Well, I want to thank you all very much for your time. It was a pleasure to talk to you now, and certainly to watch your movie,
Yes.
as I remarked, as a refreshing film after the first movie that I had watched opening the festival. It was truly wonderful to see something that actually was interesting.
Yours was, I think, the first comment we ever had from our movie.
Thank
And
you.
it was a great icebreaker.
It was.
So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Giles.